At AJR, we are so very proud to be the only Jewish seminary to be recipients of this major grant from the American Association for the Advancement of Science, Science for Seminaries program. And you may ask, why are they teaching science in a seminary? But we know how important it is, because we know that our students need to be trained not just to serve the needs of the Jewish community of today, but they need to be trained to serve the Jewish community of tomorrow. And we know in a world now where science is so often under attack, our students and our clergy need to know how to be the leaders who understand science, promote science, and know how to communicate science. So we are just thrilled that our students' education now includes this very important part, and it is yet another place where AJR's curriculum is innovative and always looking forward.
Hello. I'm Elizabeth Sternlieb, and I'm thrilled to be sharing this new web series sponsored by AJR. This series will touch upon fascinating topics, both contemporary and traditional, that impact our lives, Judaism, and the world. Welcome to Sacred Space. We are so fortunate to have Rabbi Jill Hammer, PhD, with us today. Jill is the Director of Spiritual Education at the Academy for Jewish Religion in New York. She is the co-founder of the Kohenet Hebrew Priestess Institute. Jill has published books on mysticism, feminist scholarship, and her most recent book is called Undertorah, and it explores the world of dreams. Jill, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's really my pleasure to be here. I have had this semester the opportunity to work with a team of scientists to teach this very interesting class, which is called Generations of Sky and Earth, a Science in Dialogue with Biblical Imagery. And it's really a class with a dual curriculum in which we are learning various kinds of science. And then we are looking at the ways that the biblical text expresses itself about those areas of the world, of those areas of science. And we are bringing those two ways of communicating and ways of understanding into dialogue. So, for example, we might learn about astronomy and about the way that our solar system was formed and how it works, and how planets rotate and revolve around the sun. And then we might look at biblical texts about the stars and the sun and the moon, and understand how the biblical text sees those phenomena and speaks about them. It's been really wonderfully invigorating and exciting so far.
Wow, amazing. And you're co-teaching this class?
Yes. In the first hour, we get the opportunity to study with a number of different scientists, including Dr. Alan Fry, who's a climatologist, Mr. Barry Pollack, who's a geologist, Dr. Robert Pollack, who's a biologist, who has been talking with us about natural selection and evolution, Dr. Zebra Gazinski, who's an astronomer, has been talking with us about the origin of space and time on the planets. And we'll also be joined by Kohenet Jessica Rubin, who's going to speak with us about mycology and the restoration of soil using the fungal network. So it's already been very interesting, and we have lots more to come this semester.
It does sound incredibly interesting. I'm very much wanting to take this class with you. Could you share with us one example of something that you've become aware of through the class and the subject matter that you find particularly inspiring?
Absolutely. So in our past class, just this week, Dr. Zebra Gazinski came to speak with us about astronomy. And he explained to us that there are a number of astronomical features of the Earth that are so exact that allow for life to exist on this planet. For example, the fact that we have a very large moon causes our planet's tilt to be constant. There are other planets whose tilt wobbles, so the seasons would not be regular. He explained that the fact that our solar system has a very large planet, Jupiter, draws out debris that might otherwise collide with Earth and be dangerous to life here. So it's all rather carefully, it feels like, although he assured us, that there are many planets that, of course, this is not true. Our planet has this very unusual protection of all these factors. And that was really inspiring and sparked a lot of conversation about creation and its origin and whether events are random or whether there's providence. It was a very interesting conversation.
Beautiful. These are the big questions, right, that we struggle with and we tussle with, and the idea that you are shining a light on these questions and providing some answers is just amazing and wonderful. And I wonder if you could share with me your insight on the role of religion in the modern world when science does such a great job at explaining so much of what we experience here.
I think this is a really good question, and we've talked about it a lot in class. And one of the things that Dr. Pollack said to us that I found very inspiring is that there are always going to be mysteries. That science doesn't explain everything, right? Either in the human heart or out in the universe. And even as science comes to explain more things, there will always be mysteries, and there will always be meaning making, right? Because science can tell us about things and how they work, but can't necessarily make meaning out of those things, right? That is something that, we turn to our faith systems to do. And for example, when we talked about the origin of the universe, we learned that really before the origin of the universe, there's no way of talking about time or space or what happened before that. So really, that's the province of mysticism or theology, right? Is to talk about, why are we here? Because that may not be a question that science can answer. So that made me feel actually, perhaps paradoxically, not kind of less empowered as a clergy person, but actually more empowered to tell the story of our creation in a way that is that provides people with meaning and a sense of purpose.
Beautiful. This is a time when I wish I was in school, because it really is amazing that AJR has found a way to be on the cutting edge and just inspire the clergy of today and the clergy of tomorrow and the communities that we serve.
Amen to that.
We have more inspiring words to come from Rabbi Jill Hammer at the end of the program, so stick around. Just a quick reminder to subscribe to the channel, which will support AJR, and also hit that bell icon and you'll get a reminder the next time an episode drops. It is such an honor to be with Rabbi Jill Hackle today as we talk about the Science and Religion program at the Academy for Jewish Religion. So welcome, Jill.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I'm interested first in knowing a little bit about what brought you to the Academy for Jewish Religion and how you made the transition from doctor to rabbi.
So I was working in the pharmaceutical industry doing clinical research. I had always been interested in Judaism since college days. I went to Tufts. The Somerville Havurah, the famous Somerville Havurah, was down the block. They came to campus. They taught me about Heschel's philosophy and Jewish mysticism, and I discovered a richness and breadth in Judaism that I just never realized was there. And Judaism kind of became my hobby, learning everything that I could about it. And when I had the opportunity to retire early, I could finally go to rabbinical school where I could learn more.
So when you got to AJR, how did you work your way in and find that indeed this was the place for you?
I hadn't been a student in a long time, and I was always a science student. I was a biology major in college, and coming to a place where I was going to have to do philosophical and religious thinking and write papers about it was a little bit intimidating. But then I looked at the course descriptions, and that semester a course on Jewish bioethics was being given. And I said, bioethics, that's science, I can do that. And that was my entree. Of course, I took other courses as well, but I had one anchor where I could be truly comfortable.
That's amazing. So now I know you're teaching bioethics, and there's a course that's directly connected with this science grant from the Dozer branch of the AAAS specifically, and it's a class on halacha and genetics, is that right?
That's right. We actually triple taught this class. We had a geneticist from Princeton who gave background science on how DNA works, how RNA works. And then Matthew presented Jewish law from Talmud, from Shulchan Aruch, from the different Jewish sources. And then I, with the help of responsa written by the different movements, tried to put it all together and show how you could apply ancient Jewish law to help think through really modern problems.
So speaking of modern problems or questions, really, as a synagogue rabbi, how would you use the information you learn in these classes, putting theory into action?
Well, I'll give you an example. Facing the medical issues at end of life is something that every clergy person has to help their congregants navigate. All of us are negotiating medical technology, and especially at the end of life, we have to do that. And it's difficult to counsel people through the difficult situations that they're facing. They're hearing medical information that's hard to process. They're being asked to make decisions about how long to continue treatment. Should a tube be put in to feed people? And it's very hard to negotiate. And without understanding what the people's own values are on some of these issues and how they think about it, how the one who's sick is thinking about it, it's very difficult to make decisions. There are stories in our literature that talk about end-of-life situations in ancient Talmud rabbis that are just stories, but people can listen to those stories and hear their own situations somehow in those stories, and it can help them think about what's important to them. And I think if we understand the technology and how that fits together with our text and our tradition, we can serve to guide people through this difficult time and help them come to terms with how to make a decision about them.
Thank you so much. Rabbi Jill Hackle, thank you for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to be with you and chat with you and learn from you. And we'll see you at the Academy.
Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure to see you.
I am so honored to have with me two very special guests, Rabbi Geoff Mitleman and Dr. Jennifer Wiseman. Rabbi Mitleman is the founding director of Sinai and Synapses, and Dr. Wiseman is the director of the American Association for the Advancement of Sciences program, a dialogue on science, ethics, and religion, otherwise known as Dozer. So, Dr. Wiseman, I think I'll start asking you how the Dozer program got started and what is the most exciting thing that the Dozer program is doing today?
Thank you very much. Well, Whether we realize it or not, science and technology affect just about every aspect of our lives. And certainly the way we think about who we are as human beings in the larger natural world, when we think about the environment, the planet, and the universe. And so this program was started back in the mid-1990s when the American Association for the Advancement of Science, or the AAAS, realized that in helping people with science to be a positive part of their lives, they needed to recognize that religion and religious faith and identity are a very important core of most people's identity and their lives and the way they shape their values. And so the program was started to help create connections and dialogue between scientists and faith communities in the realm of talking about ethical uses of science and technology. And one of these projects is the Science for Seminaries project, and I'm eager to talk more about that.
So how does the Dozer project connect with the Academy for Jewish Religion in New York?
We learned early on that seminaries are places where science is highly desired, but many of these seminaries have not been well equipped to incorporate forefront science into the training and experience of the students. And so together with many different kinds of seminaries across the country, we formulated a kind of program where seminaries can get support from the AAAS to incorporate science into the programs they already have, including things like religious history or pastoral care or ethics, or even study of biblical scripture and how science of today is relevant to these courses. This has proved to be a very successful way of demonstrating to these students that science is relevant to everything else in their future lives as rabbis and ministers and pastors. And we also are helping these seminaries to actually develop relationships with each other, even across different denominational and religious lines. And that's proved to be very, very fruitful and popular as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for that thorough explanation. So, Rabbi Mitleman, you are a science expert, and I feel that you've been such an innovator, and I know you'll be teaching a science literacy course at AJR. I'd love to hear what you have to say about the class and a little more about your passion for this entire subject.
Certainly, thank you both, and it's wonderful to be with you. And I've known actually Dr. Wiseman for now, believe it or not, 10 years, and the questions that we're facing in this world, they're not scientific questions and they're not religious questions, they're human questions. How do we grapple with who am I? How do I act in this world? We need wisdom and knowledge from as many sources as we can. And so one of the things that I'm very passionate about, and one of the reasons that I started Sinai and Synapses, is because there's a perception that there's two sides. One is viewed as scientific and educated and liberal, and the other side is viewed as religious and uneducated and conservative. And there's a belief that if you buy anything in either of those columns, you've got to buy everything in that column. And first of all, that's inaccurate. And second of all, it's totally unproductive. And so that creates a real, I think, a challenge and an opportunity for the Jewish community. And what we're trying to do here with AJR and with the science literacy program is to be able to say, what are some of these kinds of cutting edge questions ranging from genetic engineering to technology to origins of the universe? How can we think about and talk about these kinds of questions in a nuanced way? Another line that we often say is that the challenge in the Jewish community is not getting Jews excited about science, it's about getting Jews excited about Judaism. And so using science is a way to be able to engage people who wouldn't have been engaged otherwise. And we work very, very closely with Dozer on these projects as well.
So what kind of issues do you think might affect most or all faith communities when it comes to the subject of science and religion?
Well, I've seen this conversation change in our culture. You know, a decade or so ago, if you brought up the phrase science and religion, people would immediately say, oh, that's some kind of argument between evolution and the Bible. And now their questions and interests are so much broader and more richer than that. People are interested across religious faiths about environmental care. We're all realizing that our planet is volatile, that climate is changing, that what we do as human beings makes a difference. So many faith communities are interested in learning about the natural world, in one sense, to incorporate that into a liturgy and a sense of praise for the beauty of creation. And in another sense, for learning how this knowledge can be channeled towards service. Many faith communities from many religious traditions have a commitment to serving others. And I would add that I think for most faith communities that I've talked with, they are very excited about science. Science is not a threat. It's something that people see as very interesting, very exciting, and people want to know what we're learning and how to incorporate it in positive ways in life and family and service to others.
Yes, that was beautiful. And I would actually say that we should lean into the differences, because one of the things that is wonderful about science, and science, at least ideally, is replicable and the same, and there's a universality to it. Science is supposed to be the way that we can really understand the world that we can all agree on. The challenge is that, and I think the wonderful thing, though, about religion is that, unlike science, which is universal, religion is very particular. There are individual identities, individual communities, individual ethical questions. We may all agree on what the science is, but we may disagree on what do we do with it. One of the things that I love about Judaism is this idea of a machloket, of being able to have an argument. And that's what science is also supposed to be. Science is supposed to be, I'm going to present this data and you're going to present this data and we're going to argue about it, but we're going to argue about it in a way that's going to be constructive. And I think that's for me, that's a very valuable analogy between Judaism and science.
Great. Thank you both. Dr. Wiseman, I wonder if you would share a little bit about how science and technology might intertwine with social justice. I know that it is on everyone's mind right now.
Certainly. So there has been in the past this idea that somehow science is just objective. And we know that there's been cases throughout history when science has been used in very unethical ways, thinking of things like the Tuskegee experiments, things of that nature. But even today, in things that seem more benign, we are actually finding out that there are kinds of biases built into, let's say, some of the computer codes and things that help us manage healthcare and things like that actually end up predicting outcomes for certain groups of people that were based on a kind of biased model that went in the first place. So we're learning to be cognizant of test subjects in our scientific world and who benefits from it. And so these are justice issues that kind of intertwine with everything in science. And people are thinking more and more about how we can use science and technology in ways that actually make for a more equitable and flourishing society.
Yes, very, very important topics to think about and be aware of and stay on top of, for sure.
I think it's really important for clergy to be able to use all of these questions surrounding science and technology and their intersection with religion and ethics to be able to reach their communities. One of our biggest projects, and we are running this right now, we're having our 4th cohort of scientists in synagogues to be able to work with the people who are going to be the future leaders of, at least for us, for the Jewish community. What do they need to know? And even more importantly, how can they talk to their community in ways where they can be constructive conversations and reach a wide audience?
Beautiful. Thank you. Dr. Wiseman, any last thoughts?
I hope we remember that science is a study of the natural world. And of course, science can teach us specifics of how the natural world works, but that knowledge can enrich things like art and music and theology and philosophy and the bigger questions that we ask as human beings. And in that sense, science can be a portal to great beauty in our lives.
Thank you both so much for sharing this sacred space. And I look forward to hearing more about your work in the future. And I'll keep an eye out for you, Rabbi, at HAR.
I'm looking forward to being back.
Thank you.
I wonder if you would share a favorite verse that embodies some of this science and religion.
We were reading in the book of Job, where God describes the wonder and the diversity of creation. And God asked Job, were you there when all the morning stars sang and the angels shouted for joy? And we talked about the ways that stars sing, that stars have a resonance, have a vibration that goes out into the universe. And that was so beautiful to me. And I loved being able to connect it to that text and think about the stars singing.
As a person who has studied with you and who has been around you so closely at the Academy for Jewish Religion, I just have to say out loud that you are a star that sings, and your spirit and your song are such an inspiration to us all. And thank you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, Elizabeth. This has been such a great conversation, and I hope you come back and learn at AJR more. We miss you.
Thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you next time on Sacred Space, when we'll explore AJR's unique program called Sacred Arts. You won't want to miss it. See you then.